You will not call 911. You will not move him. Imagine holding a dying man's pulse, calling for help, and realizing you just dialed the personal cleaner for a crime syndicate. The voice on the phone breathes in total silence, calculating your fate before the black cars even arrive. When the bleeding man wakes up, his grip is like iron, and he's terrified, not of the guy who stabbed him, but of the men coming to save him. Here is exactly why you never stop in dark alleys.
Let us step into the shadows together. You and I are looking at a city that thrives on broken promises, focusing on a woman named Emma. She stands under the sickly hum of a street lamp, a phone pressed hard against her ear. At her feet lies a man bleeding out. She tells the stranger on the line about the emergency card, but the response is a chilling, heavy silence. It is not the panic of a worried father, but the calculated quiet of an apex predator. A freezing voice finally issues a command. Do not call the police. Do not move him. A wise person hangs up the phone right then. Sometimes, the most valuable life lesson we can learn is that walking away from someone else's storm is the only way to survive. But Emma stays, stepping straight into the underworld. For years, Emma survived the night shift by adhering to one absolute rule. You never stop in a dark alley. This was not born of cruelty, but of sheer exhaustion. She had spent her entire life pouring her warmth into empty cups, working grueling hours at a diner just to keep the lights on. That grind gives you a radar for trouble, teaching you to distinguish between a cry for help and a trap waiting to spring. The truth of the matter is simple. You must guard your peace relentlessly, because the world will gladly steal it if you let your guard down. Yet tonight, the universe demands a sacrifice. Seeing this man sprawled face down on the wet asphalt, reaching out as if begging the dark sky for a second chance, her golden rule simply evaporates into the freezing midnight mist. It is the suit that initially breaks her stride. We are looking at custom tailoring, practically dripping with the kind of untouchable old money that has no business bleeding in a forgotten zip code. Emma recognizes wealth instantly. Her shift ended 11 minutes ago, leaving her with a meager $16 in tips and the promise of cold soup at home. But suddenly, the mundane reality of her poverty fades away. She calls out to him, meeting only the hollow silence of the street. Dropping to her knees in a filthy puddle, she presses two trembling fingers against his neck. It is the exact motion her mother taught her the night her father collapsed. In this terrifying echo of the past, is reminded that true helplessness is a ghost that never stops haunting us. A faint pulse flutters against her fingertips. It is barely there, stumbling like a wounded animal in the dark, but the man is still breathing. She whispers into the freezing air, rolling his heavy shoulders over. That is when the brutal reality reveals itself. Thick blood courses from beneath his immaculate jacket, transforming his white shirt into a canvas of violence. Her stomach tightens into a knot. This is no accident. This is the calculated work of a predator. She pulls out her phone, her thumb hovering over the numbers for the police. But an ancient, primal instinct seizes her hand. Our body often sense danger long before our minds process it. Listen to that inner voice when it speaks. It is the ultimate alarm system, warning her that the monster might still be watching. Stay close to the details here, because you and I need to view this scene exactly as Emma experiences it. She takes in the sheer volume of blood and the unnatural emptiness of the alley. It feels deliberately sterilized, as if the shadows themselves were swept clean for an execution. Abandoning the idea of the police, her blood-stained hands rifle through his coat, gnawed desperate for a name. She extracts a leather wallet and finds his license. Ethan Sullivan, 34 years old, a resident of a world she will never afford. Then the true catalyst appears. A small, strangely heavy card slips from the leather, landing in the contaminated water at her knees. We often dig for the truth, forgetting the hard lesson that some answers only serve to drag us further into the dark. The card is a masterclass in sinister minimalism. There is no corporate logo, no friendly branding. It bears only a single phone number prostrating as a gleaming gold ink, operating as a beacon of danger. Beneath the digits sit 4 ominous words, for emergencies only. Call. Staring down at this ruined prince of the underworld, Emma picks up the card with trembling fingers and makes the call. It rings twice. A voice barks through the speaker, devoid of panic or greeting. It is the hollow tone of a judge, issuing a sentence before the trial has even begun. Yet, Emma taps into a hidden reservoir of courage. She fires back her name and location, announcing her presence in a deadly game. Life teaches us that real bravery often blooms in the most terrifying soils. She offers up his name, forcing her voice into a mask of defiance. She explains the severe bleeding, desperate for a human reaction. The silence that returns is surgical and profoundly unsettling. The voice demands the timeline of her discovery. As Emma presses her hands into the wound, the hot surge of his life slipping away, she pleads for an ambulance. Instead, the voice delivers an edict that freezes her veins. He will not be going to a hospital. The words slam shut like a steel vault. You will not move him, and you will not speak. He is orchestrating a masterclass in absolute erasure. The lesson is chilling but true. Sometimes the people meant to save you are the ones who prefer you hidden in the dark. Let us pause and look at this together, because this is where the philosophy of the streets becomes clear. You can always measure the danger of a man by the lengths he goes to hide his secrets. Normal people do not evade the authorities unless the authorities are their true enemies. A man does not keep a cleanup crew on standby at 3 a.m. unless his existence is a permanent war zone. Every instinct tells Emma to flee, but she confirms the chilling order. Yet the most unsettling detail is what happens next. The shadowy boss does not disconnect. He leaves the phone line wide open, breathing softly into the digital void. He stands guard over the silence like a grim reaper, teaching us that true power does not need to shout to make you feel its terrifying weight. The tension stretches into absolute madness. The man on the line has perfected the dark art of weaponized silence, using quiet to project total control. Emma remains anchored to the freezing pavement, enduring the breaths of a phantom while trying to keep Ethan anchored to the living. Then, exactly 1 minute and 40 seconds into this standoff, Ethan snaps back to reality. There is no gentle awakening. He surges upward with the violent urgency of a mercenary who knows weakness equals death. His eyes dart through the shadows before locking onto her. She urges him to stay still, promising help. But his voice, brittle as shattered glass, demands to know who she called. We learn quickly that in a world built on violence, salvation is often just another form of danger. Ethan forces himself to swallow, physically choking down the agony radiating through his chest. He demands an answer, panic leaking through his hardened exterior. When Emma confesses she used the golden card, the transformation in his demeanor is utterly haunting. The shock dissolves, replaced instantly by a suffocating wave of dread. It is the tragic look of a man who realizes the monster he spent his life running from has finally caught him. His hand shoots out, clamping around her wrist, with the grip of a steel trap. He asks if the boss answered directly. Upon hearing the truth, Ethan closes his eyes, his jaw locking in grim resignation. Life forces us all to face the consequences of our choices. And in this quiet sigh, Ethan finally accepts that his violent debts have come due. Leaning in close, Ethan delivers a warning laced with absolute gravity. He tells her that in exactly 2 minutes, a convoy is going to breach the alley. These are not ordinary men, he explains, but specialists in terror who will execute unspeakable tasks right in front of her. Forcing his heavy eyelids open, he stares directly into her soul and delivers one final condition. She cannot show a single ounce of fear. Emma holds his gaze without flinching, spending 12 years managing aggressive drunks, and the midnight chaos of a city diner forges a spine of iron. She has mastered the art of swallowing terror whole. When she confirms she can handle it, he gives a slow, heavy nod. The profound lesson here is universal. Never underestimate the quiet resilience of someone who survives the night shift. He offers a whispered apology, his voice heavy with the guilt of dragging an innocent soul into his nightmare. But before Emma can respond, blinding headlights shatter the darkness of the alley. 3 massive, unmarked vehicles slide into the narrow space, operating with the terrifying synchronization of a wolf pack on pork circling its prey. Dog, sock. Giant, silent men pour out into the freezing rain. They swarm Ethan, immediately communicating through sharp, wordless gestures, completely erasing Emma from the equation. It is a stark reminder that in the circles of elite power, ordinary people are treated like invisible ghosts. Finally, one of the enforcers turns dead, vacant eyes toward her and commands her to step back. It is not a request, but a brutal law of nature demanding immediate obedience. As Emma retreats, a 4th vehicle emerges from the mist. This one is an armored beast radiating an oppressive gravity. The older man, who steps onto the asphalt, changes the very air pressure of the alley. His silver hair catches the rain, his expensive coat thrown on with frantic haste. This is Vincent Sullivan, a king surveying his broken empire. His eyes lock onto his bleeding son, and in that fractured second, you and I witness the devastating truth of the cycle of violence. We see the raw agony of a father realizing his own toxic legacy has destroyed his flesh and blood. But just as quickly, the patriarch locks that humanity away behind a vault of cold steel. He steps forward, pressing a trembling hand to his boy's face. The ultimate lesson is simple. We always reap the sorrow we sow. Consider that raw, unvarnished look of sheer panic, the kind that strips away every polite fiction we tell ourselves. Emma stands backed against the damp brick of a filthy alley, desperately trying to project innocence to the architect of the city underworld. But her eyes scream a narrative she cannot suppress. Vincent Sullivan does not just occupy the space. He eclipses it. He moves with the terrifying, unhurried grace of an apex predator who already secured his kill. When he tells her he knows she made the call, it is not a guess. It is the cold calculus of a man whose empire is built on knowing. You cannot disguise your terror from someone who speaks the language of human frailty. The mask always slips when survival is on the line, leaving nothing but the absolute truth. Vincent remains still, studying her with the detachment of a man auditing a fragile contract. He searches for hairline fractures in her composure. Yet Emma refuses to shatter. She anchors herself to the whispered words Ethan gave her, forging that sliver of defiance into a desperate armor. Then demands to know his son's waking words. Vincent demands to know his son's waking words. It is the kind of psychological weight that crushes ordinary people. Emma meets the gaze of the mob boss without blinking, and states that Ethan only asked if she was unharmed. It is an answer so disarmingly human that it genuinely stuns the kingpin. True courage, as it turns out, is never the absence of terror. It is planting your feet firmly on the ground, while every instinct begs you to run away. The air in the alley grows impossibly thick, vibrating with lethal tension. Vincent issues one final test, pressing her on whether those were truly his son's only words. Emma does not flinch. As silence settles over the damp pavement, a profound shift alters Vincent's demeanor. It is devoid of warmth. yet heavy with absolute respect. He recognizes that this ordinary waitress is handing him the unvarnished truth. He informs her that his son draws breath solely because of her actions, establishing a life debt he will never erase. Emma immediately counters that she sought no reward. Character is carved in the dark, in those quiet moments when no one is watching. By choosing integrity over advantage, she just disarmed the most dangerous man in the entire city. For a fleeting second, the architect of the city underworld betrays a flicker of genuine comprehension, quietly acknowledging her pure intentions. Then the moment shatters. He turns, and his operatives descend like a choreographed shadow unit. Within moments, the ambulance vanishes, the concrete is sterilized, and the violent tableau is erased from history. He instructs Emma to return home, promising future contact. But before she retreats, he delivers a chilling piece of wisdom. He warns her that fleeing only triggers a predator to hunt. But a steady walk might just grant her mercy. Panic paints a target on your back in any crisis. Mastery over your own fear does not just project strength. It is the very mechanism that secures your own survival. Let us map out the psychological weight of those next 6 blocks. Emma drags herself toward her apartment, her legs heavy as cast iron, practically suffocating in the dense silence of the city. She finally breaches her front door, throws the deadbolt, and collapses onto the couch. The digital clock burns 9:30 into the dark room. Barely half an hour has evaporated, yet an entire lifetime seems to have passed. We all recognize that cold gravity of pure shock. Suddenly, her phone vibrates with an unknown caller. It is Vincent, reaching out through the dead of night to verify her safe arrival. The irony is agonizing. Sometimes the very darkness we sprint away from has already beaten us home, quietly waiting in the sanctuary we mistakenly thought was secure. A paralyzing frost cascades down her spine. When she questions how he knew she had crossed her threshold, Vincent offers a chillingly mathematical reply. He simply calculated her average walking speed against the distance. The man turned her trauma into an equation. After she confirms she is indoors, he sets the hook. He states that his son intends to express his gratitude properly, framing it as an expectation rather than an offer. Every rational synapse in Emma's brain screams at her to sever the connection. Yet, guided by a primal instinct to appease a predator, she hears her own voice. Quietly out of your depth is often the crucial first step to surviving a deadly game. The board is set, and she is officially trapped. Just before severing the connection, Vincent weaves one final thread into the trap. He notes his deliberate choice to believe her account of the night, asking if she grasps the vast chasm between his belief and a simple request. This is no polite invitation. It is an absolute edict handed down from a sovereign of the underworld. Emma fully comprehends the gravity of the moment. A colossal debt has just been chained to her identity, and her consent was never part of the equation. She murmurs her understanding. You and I have likely stood at our own painful crossroads, learning this harsh truth. Every choice we enact carries an invisible invoice, even the ones born from selfless kindness on a blood-stained street. Her quiet world has been entirely eclipsed by theirs. The line goes dead, and the resulting silence rings loud enough to shatter glass. Resting on the table, her congealed soup and forgotten coffee stand as pitiful monuments to the mundane life she lost hours ago. She stares down at her trembling hands, the very same hands that desperately kept a Mafia heir from bleeding out. Now clutching the calling card of a crime lord, she had been so comfortably invisible, content in the margins of the city. But as the clock pushes past 3 a.m, the illusion dissolves. Her ordinary existence has been reduced to ash. We must recognize that innocence is a one-way door. Once you step beyond the threshold and witness the mechanics of the dark, you cannot simply close your eyes and pretend the shadows do not exist. The true psychological marvel here is that Emma does not dwell on the morality of her actions. The only terror keeping her eyes open is the looming, shapeless ghost of what happens tomorrow. And the tragic certainty is that tomorrow is already arriving. Instead of packing a suitcase and vanishing across state lines, she physically anchors herself to normalcy, clocking into her morning shift by 6:45 to brew cheap coffee. You and I have probably engineered this exact same denial during a crisis. When the fundamental pillars of your reality undergo a violent collapse, clinging desperately to the mundane rhythm of your daily routine becomes a survival tactic. It is the solitary anchor preventing a total psychological fracture while the storm rages outside. Emma paces behind the worn laminate counter, mechanically refilling the coffee machine, desperately constructing a mental fortress where Vincent Sullivan is just a bad dream. She maintains this fragile illusion until exactly 9:17 in the morning. That is when the fantasy fractures. A massive, sleek black sedan glides up to the diner window like a shark inspecting a cage. It does not park, it merely idles, its pitch-black tinted windows hiding an undeniable threat. The sudden spike of dread causes Emma to spill scalding coffee across a regular customer's mug. The universe has a cruel sense of irony. Burying a catastrophic problem in the back of your mind never starves it of oxygen. It merely affords the nightmare enough time to drive up and wait right at your front door. She attempts to rationalize the sedan away as a coincidence, but the human nervous system rarely lies. Just before noon, the digital buzz of her phone shatters her denial. Retreating to the dim sanctuary of the break room, she answers. It is not the kingpin this time, but rather a voice polished to a lethal smoothness. The man identifies himself as Daniel, an emissary of the Sullivan Syndicate, calling simply to confirm a 3 o'clock extraction. Panic overtakes her, and she wields her work schedule like a shield, protesting that her shift is far from over. The brutal reality of power dynamics becomes painfully clear. True authority never concerns itself with the trivial boundaries of your life. When the house sets the rules, your only option is to play the hand you are dealt. Daniel is entirely immune to her desperation. He merely echoes his previous statement with chilling politeness: a vehicle will arrive at 3, rendering her protests void. Emma is left standing in the greasy, fluorescent-lit hallway, staring at her phone as if it were a live grenade. Without a viable exit strategy, she numbly returns to the dining floor to wipe down sticky tables. There is a profound truth in this paralysis. Sometimes, when a tidal wave is approaching, the only action left is to sweep the floor until the water hits. As the clock ticks to 2:55, the chime above the diner door rings out. The agonizing wait for a disaster often tortures the mind far worse than the impact itself, but eventually you still have to turn around and face the storm. She pivots on her heel, her heart hammering against her ribs, entirely braced for the syndicate air. Instead, the figure crossing the threshold is Daniel. He is a study in calculated menace, wrapped in a bespoke suit with eyes that evaluate the room like a tactical grid. He operates as an advanced scout, dissecting the diner for vulnerabilities before making a single movement. Watching him is like watching a hawk analyze a field of prey. It is the physical manifestation of the point of no return. The exact second his polished shoes scuffed her cheap linoleum floor, her quiet reality was pulverized. People rarely get to orchestrate the defining turns of their lives. When fate throws a physical embodiment of danger through your front door, the only victory is remaining standing. Yet Daniel is merely the prologue. Stepping through the door behind him, instantly shifting the atmospheric pressure of the entire room, is the heir himself. Ethan Sullivan is no longer the broken casualty fading away on damp asphalt. He is meticulously restored, a walking amalgamation of old wealth and suppressed violence. His dark, unreadable eyes find Emma through the haze of the diner, and he notes with a soft voice that he is early. That is the chilling paradox of true power. Those who genuinely wield it never have to raise their voices to command a room. We construct false narratives, judging people by the solitary moment we saw them bleed. But true survival demands that you recognize the lethal co-industry beneath the suit when it finally arrives at your counter. Emma stands frozen, acutely burdened by the absurdity of her own reflection. She is cloaked in the scent of burnt espresso, a heavy grease stain, serving as a mocking badge on her uniform. She is profoundly unequipped to engage in a psychological chess match with Mafia royalty. Yet, bypassing his silent authority, she dictates that he must give her 5 minutes, turning her back on him completely. Approaching her manager, she fabricates a family emergency, her voice maintaining a frighteningly level pitch as she unties her apron. Humans naturally construct these invisible armors. When life drags you into an arena you never trained for, the most triumphant act of defiance is stepping off the stage for just 60 seconds, washing your face, and remembering exactly who you are. Let us take a closer look at this pivotal moment together. Emma retreats to the cramped employee bathroom, locking the door against the chaos. She stares at her exhausted reflection in the fractured glass, whispering an empty assurance that she is perfectly fine. It is a fragile lie. Yet, when she pushes back through those swinging doors, the narrative shifts. Ethan rises from his stool. It is a deliberate, old-world gesture of respect that catches her entirely off guard. He is not there on his father's orders, but by his own quiet volition. We spend so much of our lives sprinting away from our deepest fears, constructing walls to keep the heat out. But the truth is, our most profound evolution only begins when we willingly turn around and walk directly back into the flames. Emma collapses onto the adjacent stool. Her physical exhaustion finally shatters her brave facade. She studies in brutal reality, questioning the brutal reality of his cracked ribs and fresh stitches. Ethan waves the damage away with a practiced indifference, treating survival like a casual inconvenience, but Emma refuses to let him hide behind that stoic mask. Her voice softens as she reminds him that he was hovering on the absolute edge of death. A shadow flickers across his eyes, acknowledging the grim truth. In a single night, she pulled him from the brink and deceived a ruthless mob boss to his face. Life rarely sends a warning before it decides to test our breaking point. The truest measure of our character is simply how we hold our ground when the pressure is heavy enough to crush our bones. The word hangs heavily in the quiet diner. Lied. Ethan makes no attempt to soften the blow. Emma immediately raises her defenses, arguing that she merely withheld certain details. But Ethan was raised inside the machinery of organized crime. He understands intimately is just a lie wearing a different mask. He reassures her that he holds no anger. From the cold pavement of that alley, he watched her mind work. He saw her weigh the staggering risks and actively choose to shield him. She did not surrender to panic. She made a calculated decision. Trusting your intuition when everything is on the line is the ultimate survival mechanism. It reveals a quiet, buried strength, proving to the world that you are far more dangerous than your gentle exterior ever suggested. Notice how the tension fundamentally shifts here. Emma has survived 12 years of grinding midnight shifts, handling unpredictable chaos until she learned to outrun her own panic. Across the counter, Ethan offers a slow, knowing nod. He recognizes that survival instinct, even though his training ground was paved with blood and broken loyalty. They sit wrapped in a profound, heavy silence, the kind only shared by two people who have stared down disaster. With extreme caution, she asks if the ambush was merely random violence, despite her intuition already screaming the grim reality. You and I know this feeling well. Sometimes we ask a question not to seek the truth, but simply to buy ourselves a few more seconds of comfortable illusion before the brutal reality shatters our fragile world entirely. Ethan does not even blink. A cold certainty settles over him as he confirms the hit was orchestrated from inside his own crime family. He locks eyes with her, a flicker of genuine respect breaking through his guard. Emma had deduced the reality of the trap. She understood that the phone call was designed specifically to draw his father away, proving the traitor knew the Sullivan syndicate from the inside out. Ethan sets his mug against the counter with a slow, chilling precision. It is a dark realization, but true peril rarely waits in the shadows of an unfamiliar street. The most devastating wounds are never inflicted by strangers. They are delivered by the very people who have spent years eating at your table and memorizing the weak points in your own carefully guarded sanctuary. Ethan candidly admits she defies every expectation he had. He anticipated a shattered, trembling witness, but Emma meets him with unvarnished honesty. She confesses that she is profoundly terrified, operating on sheer adrenaline since 2:17 in the morning. Yet she fiercely refuses to let that terror dictate her actions. In that quiet admission, the invisible armor surrounding the Mafia heir cracks. For a fleeting second, the isolated soul beneath the syndicate machinery is exposed. Then comes the chilling revelation. The dawn demands her presence again tonight. We often exhaust ourselves trying to project an unbreakable image to the world. But genuine bravery is not the absence of fear. True courage is feeling your hands shake and refusing to let the fear make your decisions for you. Emma freezes, the chill of his words taking hold. She argues that her introduction to the crime boss already happened over a pool of blood at 3 in the morning. Ethan holds her gaze, his expression grim. That was merely a chaotic field test. Tonight is formal, structured, and profoundly dangerous. His father intends to offer gratitude, but his true motive is to dissect her psychology. Ethan chooses his syllables with surgical care, fully aware of their lethal implications. The Don needs to understand the mind of a civilian bold enough to lie to a kingpin. We are all ultimately defined by the quiet choices we make when the world is entirely asleep. But inevitably, life will drag you out of the shadows, and you must be prepared to hold your ground when the blinding spotlight finally forces your hand. Emma glances around the warm, humming space of the diner. The espresso machine hisses. Old Mr. Delgado turns a page of his newspaper. It is a portrait of ordinary, peaceful existence. Resting right on the edge of the criminal abyss, she forces out the critical question, asking what happens if she simply refuses the invitation. Ethan lowers his voice into a gravelly whisper. He warns her that declining leaves a void, and his paranoid father will immediately fill that silence with deadly suspicions. It is a sobering realization. You cannot simply close your eyes and pray the hurricane decides to spare your home. Choosing to avoid a conflict is still a definitive choice. Sometimes, stepping backward to dodge the storm is the exact movement that draws the lightning directly to your feet. Emma instinctively decodes the underlying threat. Allowing a paranoid boss to write his own narrative is an absolute death sentence. She whispers that it is no choice at all, and suddenly, a breathless, genuine laugh escapes her throat. It is the hollow, helpless laughter of a mind pushed so far into absurdity that it simply snaps. Ethan watches her, captivated by the raw, chaotic resilience radiating from her. They settle on 7 o'clock for the dinner. Then, with casual devastation, he reveals that his father has absolutely no idea he is sitting in this diner. The temperature in the room seems to plummet instantly. When you are backed against a concrete wall with no way out, sometimes the only thing left to do is laugh, if only to remind yourself that your heart is still stubbornly beating. Emma notes a subtle tightening in his posture, a micro-tension betraying the monumental risk he is running. He has slipped off the syndicate grid entirely to deliver this warning. His proposed strategy is nothing short of staggering. He instructs her to face his father and tell the unvarnished truth about his confession in the alley. He intends to absorb the entirety of his father's wrath, pulling her out of the suffocating web of deceit he created. This is where the concept of guardianship takes on a deeper meaning. True protection is not merely shielding someone from an ugly reality. It is the conscious choice to step directly into the line of fire, ensuring another soul is not crushed by a violent burden they never asked to carry. That is the essence of genuine, bleeding loyalty. Emma studies the bruises blooming across his pale skin, asking the defining question, why would a Mafia heir risk his life for an anonymous waitress? Ethan's silence is heavy, steeped in years of unspoken trauma. He has witnessed how carrying secrets for the Sullivan Empire slowly rots a person from the inside out, and he refuses to watch her spirit get devoured by that same poison. He rises, leaving 2 crisp bills beside his empty mug. Normally, she would argue the tip, but instead, she halts him at the glass door. She demands to know the exact words he whispered as he bled out in the dark. Empathy, you see, always flows from our deepest wounds. The individuals who fight the hardest to pull you out of the dark are often the very ones who have lived their entire lives buried within it. The diner seems to suspend in time. The familiar clanking of ceramic dissolves into a breathless void. Ethan holds her gaze across the room, letting the silence stretch until it is almost unbearable. When the words finally leave him, they are a hollow whisper carrying a devastating weight. He confesses his belief that the assassination attempt was an inside job. With that quiet detonation, he pushes through the glass door, dissolving into the city. Emma is left rooted to her stool, her coffee turning cold as the sheer horror of the implication washes over her. The very men who serve his father are the ones holding the knives. The towering fortresses we build to keep the monsters at bay become meaningless the moment we realize the beasts are already locked inside the gates with us. Let us step back and examine the gravity of this escalation together. An operative within the syndicate attempted to slaughter the heir apparent, and the patriarch is completely blind to his son's awareness of the betrayal. Now, a worn-out waitress is left cradling this explosive secret. Emma carefully folds her stained apron, preparing for a high-stakes interrogation masked as a formal dinner. A flawless black sedan arrives precisely at 6:55. The stoic enforcer pulls the heavy door open like the jaw of a steel trap. Yet she steps inside without hesitation. There is a profound psychology to the point of no return. The true agony is always the paralysis of overthinking right at the edge of the precipice. Once you finally force yourself to step off the ledge, the fear evaporates, and all you feel is the wind. As Emma leans against the frigid glass, we watch her chaotic world dissolve into the pristine, towering estates of the elite. This car ride mirrors a crossing of realms into an incredibly gorgeous but profoundly toxic universe. She is trapped in the echo of Ethan's warning, understanding that his syndicate forces you into a corner where survival dictates your next move. The vehicle glides to a halt before an understated, elegant townhouse. There are no imposing gates or armed guards here, just the quiet, terrifying arrogance of old money. We can pull a simple life lesson from this moment. True danger rarely announces itself with a kick-down door. More often than not, it waits for you patiently behind a beautifully carved, silent entrance. The massive oak door swings open before her foot, even lands on the top step. In the threshold stands a woman with silver hair and a comforting sweater. She looks exactly like a welcoming grandmother, which Emma recognizes instantly as a brilliantly crafted illusion. The woman addresses her as Miss Turner with a voice like warm honey, announcing that the dawn is ready. The exact second Emma steps inside, the chaotic city noise is severed, replaced by a suffocating silence. Rosa drifts down the shadowed corridors, like a phantom bound to the estate, never once checking if Emma is following. It offers us a quiet truth to remember. Sometimes the people who greet you with the warmest smiles are the exact same individuals hired to guard the darkest cages. You and I have both experienced that sickening moment of passing the point of no return. The front door clicks shut behind her, sealing her inside. With Rosa gliding silently ahead, walking forward becomes her only survival strategy. Rosa halts before a set of towering double doors, taps twice, and offers a chilling smile. She asks if Emma would like coffee, as if preparing for a casual book club. Emma keeps her tone steady and politely declines. Rosa dissolves into the dark hallway, leaving her entirely isolated. Emma takes a massive breath, bracing herself as if stepping into the path of a speeding train. Life often requires those profound, grounding breaths right before you step into the ring to face your personal demons. She shoves the heavy wood open. Vincent does not even afford her the courtesy of turning around. He lets Emma walk into his silent office and stand there like an abandoned stray. Emma recognizes this calculated power play immediately. Every subtle maneuver this crime boss makes is engineered to crush the spirit. Letting her marinate in that brutal silence is his method of asserting dominance. When he finally pivots, he appears drastically transformed from the panicked father in the bloody alley. He is polished, wearing a sharp, dark jacket. The Mob King has reclaimed his throne, yet his eyes remain a dead void. It points to a savage truth we often ignore. You can dress a monster in an inexpensive tailored suit, but his cold, empty eyes will always expose the sheer destruction he leaves in his wake. Let us examine the psychological warfare unfurling right here. Vincent runs her through a mental X-ray, dissecting her entirely with a single glance. He offers a smooth thank you for coming, and Emma bravely holds her ground. Rather than hiding behind a massive desk like a typical executive, Vincent sits directly across from her. There are zero physical barriers, just an intimate, deadly confrontation. He calmly reveals that his son mentioned she refused a ride home, stunning Emma. Vincent states flatly that Ethan shares everything with him. It teaches us a vital lesson about vulnerability. We assume hiding behind thick walls keeps us protected, but the smartest predators know that removing their own shield is exactly what makes their prey freeze in absolute terror. A fleeting ghost of a smile stretches across his jaw. He notes that his son sought her out first, probing to uncover their discussion. Emma stares unflinchingly into the dark abyss of his eyes, remembering Ethan's desperate plea. In this heavy silence, she chooses her allegiance. Speaking rapidly under the immense psychological strain, she reveals that Ethan suspects his own syndicate orchestrated the hit. The air in the room instantly turns to lead. Vincent Sullivan completely stops breathing and goes unnaturally still. You can measure a man by what it takes to paralyze him. The profound life lesson here is unavoidable. Our deepest wounds always come from the people we love the most, simply because that is the one place where we willingly drop our heavy armor. You and I need to pause here, because we both know just how deafening a quiet room can become. Vincent sits in perfect stillness, but his mind is violently unraveling. He barely whispers the words. Did he? We know that was an expression of grief, not a question. Emma delivers the fatal blow with the detached tone of a waitress reading a lunch receipt. Then, Vincent offers nothing for 6 agonizing seconds. Emma is forced to count every tick of the clock. Enduring 6 seconds of dead air from a lethal crime boss feels exactly like drowning in a frozen lake. It brings us to a deeply uncomfortable truth. We spend our entire lives running from silence, constantly generating background noise because absolute quiet forces us to face the terrible realities we simply cannot outrun. He slowly rises from his chair, moving as though iron weights are chained to his ankles, and drifts toward the window. Watching the heavy slump of his shoulders, Emma witnesses a father absorbing a devastating bullet he subconsciously knew was coming. He asks the Etmut glass why his son would entrust such a secret to a girl he met hours ago. Emma sharply replies that this is precisely the reason. She is just a random nobody. Confiding in her did not compromise his standing as a main tangle him in the syndicate's toxic politics. It proves a profound point about human psychology. There is an immense freedom in confessing to a stranger. When your closest allies are the ones holding the daggers, the only genuine sanctuary left is a random face in a dark alley. Vincent turns with agonizing slowness, pinning her with a hollow stare that will linger in her memory. This is the shattered portrait of a kingpin, who received the unvarnished truth from a humble waitress, because his inner circle was too paralyzed to speak it. He murmurs that her intellect is sharper than she pretends. Emma refuses his psychological games, stating she is exactly who she appears to be. The space plunges back into a deafening quiet. Then, defying logic, the terrifying patriarch almost smiles. Just a brief twitch of respect before the mask returns. It drops a heavy truth bomb on us. The most powerful people on Earth are starved for the one thing their endless wealth cannot buy. A single person brave enough to look them in the eye and hand them the brutal truth. Emma knows the difference between a theatrical performance and a carefully constructed mask fracturing. Last night, she witnessed a terrified father, but tonight she is analyzing a broken king. As he sinks into his chair, the heavy pressure in the room drops. He softly requests that she share her own story. Emma had prepared for a ruthless interrogation, yet instead, this lethal boss regards her with genuine curiosity. She whispers that her life lacks much of a story. Vincent counters smoothly, suggesting those with the least to say are frequently the ones most worth knowing. It highlights a profound tragedy in our society. The loudest voices in the room are often completely hollow, while quiet observers silently carry the immense weight of the world on their shoulders. Emma outlines her mother's illness and her desperate need for survival, refusing to project a single ounce of self-pity. Her tone is forged from hardened steel, the voice of a girl forced to mature decades too early. She admits she is entirely alone now. Vincent absorbs this, allowing the heavy gravity of her isolation to settle. He notes she took that dark alleyway as a shortcut and asks why she stopped for a bleeding stranger. Emma confesses she genuinely does not know. Vincent's voice softens, revealing he knows exactly why. She is simply incapable of walking away. We exist in a culture where people routinely turn a blind eye to ensure their own safety. The undeniable lesson is that possessing such brutal empathy will inevitably drag you straight into the fire. Stick with me here, because Vincent makes a profound observation. He explains that to survive in this city, people systematically train themselves to ignore. It is basic survival, but he notes she never learned that emotional numbness. Looking at her with genuine respect, he states this exact flaw is what saved his son's life. Those words effectively strip away his remaining armor. Emma gently asks how Ethan is recovering. Vincent replies his son is angry, which means he will survive, because Ethan only goes silent when he is fundamentally broken. This leaves us with a massive life lesson carved into our own scars. We are taught to view anger as a toxic weapon, but occasionally, raw fury is the only remaining fuel that proves we are still fighting to stay alive. The heavy facade of the ruthless crime lord melts away, leaving behind only a terrified, aging father. Vincent looks at Emma, his voice bleeding with the severe paranoia of a man who has survived too long in the underworld. He asks if she is genuinely glad his son is still breathing. Emma does not blink. She simply tells him yes. Vincent leans forward, elbows on his knees, carrying the bone-deep exhaustion of a man who has outlived his own soul. Let us look at this closely, you and I. He asks what she intends to do with this dangerous knowledge. She answers nothing. In a world built on blood, we learn a quiet truth. The most valuable currency is never money or weapons. It is trust, and sometimes the greatest gift we can offer is to bury someone else's darkest secret. Emma holds her ground, repeating that she will do absolutely nothing. Her voice remains steady, yet it carries a hollow weight, ringing like a solitary bell in the dead of night. She explains her simple plan. Tomorrow, she will go back to pouring coffee and wipe this entire Mafia nightmare from her memory. She demands no money and wants no favors. She made a choice to stay, but refuses to become a piece on their violent chessboard. Vincent simply stares at her. The silence stretches, so thick you can hear the antique clock carving away the seconds. But there is a hard truth about human nature we cannot ignore. Once you cross the threshold into the dark, you cannot simply unsee the shadows. Some doors, once kicked open, will never close again. Vincent counters immediately, his voice a low rumble. He points out that her innocent speech is exactly the kind of cover story a hidden player would use. Emma absorbs the accusation and calmly states that she cannot prove a negative. The choice to believe her rests entirely on his shoulders. Vincent exhales a long, slow breath, finally admitting that he chooses to trust her word. But then the atmosphere turns to ice. He warns her that carrying these lethal secrets strips away her innocence. In this brutal environment, her good intentions mean absolutely nothing. A cold shiver races down Emma's spine. It is a harsh reality we all must face eventually. Pure intentions will never serve as a bulletproof vest against a cruel world. She is officially part of it now. Emma is quick to point out the glaring flaw in his logic. The other men operating in this criminal underground do not share Vincent's rare capacity for mercy. They will paint their own violent conclusions. She lowers her voice, reminding him that someone just tried to murder his son, leaving her as the only loose thread. Whoever ordered that strike will inevitably come to pull it. Vincent remains as still as a carved statue, but a flicker of surprise crosses his dark eyes. He confesses that she is not at all what he anticipated. A sudden chill runs through her, remembering that Ethan spoke those exact same words only hours ago. Father and son bound by the same instinct. It is a strange irony of life. We walk directly into our fate while desperately trying to avoid it. Vincent drops his guard, admitting he fully expected her to demand a heavy bag of hush money. He was prepared to pay, knowing it was the standard cost of doing business, yet deep down it would have disappointed him. Emma meets his gaze and fires back with dry sarcasm. She tells him she fully expected him to slide a massive check across the table. forcing her to decide between playing the offended civilian or taking the practical payout. Vincent leans in, genuinely curious, and asks which path she would have chosen. Emma offers a small smirk, then suggesting she would choose both out of pure efficiency. The aging crime boss actually cracks a smile. We all spend years building heavy armor to survive, but true courage is simply knowing when to let someone see through the cracks. The atmosphere in the room shifts in a fraction of a second. You and I know that suffocating, heavy air right before a massive thunderstorm breaks open. Vincent, stepping fully back into his role as the Don, locks his eyes onto hers. He tells her he is not going to throw cash at the problem. He is going to offer something far more valuable. He opens the heavy oak door, and his loyal shadow, Rosa, appears almost instantly. Vincent gives a quiet, absolute command, and she vanishes just as fast. Then he hands Emma a private burner phone. He orders her to call the second she feels watched, or if a car idles too long. The cold truth is that absolute safety is an illusion. Sometimes the very shield we raise to protect ourselves is the exact thing painting a target on our chest. Emma is practically vibrating, her pulse hammering wildly against her ribs. She asks if he genuinely believes there is a target on her back. Vincent measures his words carefully, speaking as if he is clipping the final wire on an explosive. He admits he is not certain yet, but until he is, he wants her no more than 30 seconds away from his protection. The heavy door groans, and Ethan steps into the dim light. He immediately reads the rigid posture of his father, piecing the puzzle together in real time. Ethan states flatly that she told him everything. Emma replies softly that he literally told her to do so. They lock eyes, engaging in a silent, agonizing argument. The deepest wounds we carry rarely come from shouting. They come from the heavy silence of those we care about. Vincent fires the question at his son like a bullet. He demands to know who ordered the hit. The words smash into the quiet tension of the room. Ethan does not flinch, but his jaw clenches with such force it might shatter. That split second of hesitation is a dead giveaway. He knows exactly who holds the blame. Ethan growls that they are not having this conversation right now, throwing a desperate, protective glance toward Emma. Vincent barks back that she stays right where she is. Ethan argues she is just a civilian, but the aging Don shuts him down completely. She stopped being a nobody the moment she called them for help. When a life is built on a foundation of street wars, stepping up to protect one innocent person might be the only way to wash the old blood from your hands. Emma sinks deeper into her chair, suddenly a captive audience to a vicious standoff between and son. Imagine the sheer psychological toll of growing up inside this cycle of violence, where every conversation feels like walking through a minefield. Ethan locks his dark, bruised eyes onto hers, but Emma refuses to look away. She never asked to be dragged into their bloody family history, and she is entirely finished apologizing for simply trying to survive. Finally, Ethan breaks. He spits out a single name, Caruso. The word drips with pure venom as he holds her gaze. It is a terrifying moment, but it reveals a universal truth. We only begin to conquer our worst nightmares the exact moment we finally gather the courage to drag them into the light and say their names out loud. Vincent lets that toxic name hang in the air, his face an unreadable mask of stone. Ethan pushes forward, his long-held frustration finally boiling over. He explains that Marco Caruso and his men have been bleeding into their territory for 6 months, yet his father demanded he stand down. Unable to swallow his pride, Ethan admits he took matters into his own hands. He launched a raid, got tracked, and ended up with a blade in his ribs. The silence that follows is suffocating. Vincent whispers the accusation, realizing his own son orchestrated a strike without permission. Ethan fires back, completely unashamed of his rebellion. Bad blood always spreads fastest in the dark, feeding eagerly on the messy, uncomfortable truths we are far too afraid to admit when it truly matters. Vincent asks why, his voice dropping like a heavy stone. Ethan glares at the man who raised him and says he knew his father would bench him. The raw anguish that washes over Vincent is difficult to watch. It is not just anger. It is the deep, mourning tragedy of an aging king, realizing his empire is decaying from the inside out. Let us unpack this together. Vincent realizes his son assumed there was a rat in the family. He thought the most trusted men at their table would snitch to Caruso. Ethan offers no defense, letting the heavy silence act as his confession. Vincent slowly turns his back, staring blankly out. The most brutal wake-up call in life is discovering that the massive walls you built to keep monsters out have only locked them inside with you. Emma watches the tension drain from Vincent's shoulders, realizing she is witnessing a giant of the underworld slowly collapse. Speaking to the glass, Vincent asks how long his son suspected a traitor was eating at their table. Ethan swallows hard, his arrogant swagger entirely gone. 4 months, that timeline strikes the old boss like a physical blow, snapping whatever strength he had left. He cannot believe his own son hid this from him. Ethan finally shatters, shouting that he had no concrete proof, only a stab wound and a gut feeling. In that exact moment, the hardened mobster fades, revealing the terrified child beneath. Lowering your defenses is always a terrifying gamble, but it remains the only way to shatter the useless barriers we build out of blind, stubborn pride. The scene strips away the glamorous illusion of organized crime, leaving nothing but a fractured boy desperate for his father to finally understand him. Emma watches the quiet devastation unfold, the heavy silence thickening the air. Vincent turns from the glass, an aging patriarch trapped between his ruthless public persona and the crushing fear of putting his own son in the ground. The boss stares at the bruised air he created, then turns to the waitress. "Miss Turner," he murmurs, his voice stripped of its usual power, "I owe you a massive apology. You took a random shortcut and walked into a war. It reveals a quiet truth about our world. The harshest punishments rarely fall on the guilty. They often crush the innocent, who simply stand in the wrong place at the wrong time." He lets that suffocating reality settle across the room like ash. "I am so sorry," he says, "because wearing a target on your back is no reward for playing the hero." Emma studies the aging boss. He wears his panic over his child like a tailored suit, impeccable but incredibly heavy. She recalls the diner, picturing Ethan bruised and broken, realizing both the crime lord and the assassin are bending over backward to protect a girl who merely poured their coffee. She lifts her chin, refusing to be small. "Do not apologize yet," she replies. "Let us see who actually survives." Today, you and I are going to unpack this story together, because the strangest irony of life is discovering undeniable honor locked inside the exact people society tells us to fear. "We," Emma says. It is a tiny word, but she drops it into the room like an anchor, completely refusing to pull it back. The grandfather clock ticks against the wall, methodically counting down the final seconds of her ordinary existence. Out there, the city sleeps under yellow streetlights, blind to the fact that a forgotten waitress has crossed an invisible line. The girl who was perfectly content surviving on double shifts and a worn-out sofa no longer exists. She meets the gaze of both men, anchoring herself in their violent current. It forces us to recognize a beautiful paradox. The blind corners and wrong turns we desperately try to avoid rarely take us where we planned, but they invariably place us exactly where we truly need to be. She slips out of the fortified compound just before 10, and by sunrise, she is tying her canvas apron behind the diner counter. It is a stunning display of psychological compartmentalization. Emma stares true danger in the face, then pivots to serving cheap coffee as if the night never happened. After all, the landlord does not pause rent for Mafia entanglements. Yet, the fabric of her reality is already tearing. The dark sedan from yesterday has vanished, replaced by a silver car idling near the alley. New paint, stolen plates, same predatory stillness. The universe constantly projects massive warning signs into our path, whispering that the storm is already here. If only we would stop looking away and actually read the writing on the wall. The silver vehicle anchors the street corner until late morning, then evaporates without a trace. Exactly 2 blocks down, a completely different car assumes the exact same line of sight. If the aging crime boss had not taught her how to spot the shadows, she would have completely missed the silent rotation. She swallows the rising panic, knowing that showing fear is the quickest way to become prey in a predator's game. Around noon, a stranger slides into a corner booth. He orders pie, stares intensely at his phone, and abandons a $20 bill for a $7 check without ever lifting his eyes. It illustrates a chilling principle. The people making the least amount of noise are almost always the ones carrying the deadliest intentions. Emma fills his ceramic mug twice, wearing the hollow smile of retail hospitality while forensically examining his demeanor. She notices how he presses his spine flat against the booth, his gaze obsessively tracking the front glass. It is the undeniable physical signature of a man who lives in constant anticipation of an ambush. When he finally vanishes, she spots a small, folded napkin wedged beneath his cup. Moving with practiced calm, she palms the paper like ordinary trash. In the dim light of the back hallway, she unfolds the message. 4 words, written in razor-sharp ink. Do not go home tonight. We eventually learn that the most catastrophic turning points in our life rarely announce themselves with thunder. They arrive as quiet whispers. She stands entirely paralyzed in the narrow corridor, the silence ringing loudly in her ears. Snapping back to reality, she shoves the warning deep into her pocket and seamlessly merges back into the chaotic lunch hour. By mid-afternoon, the pressure becomes unbearable. She retreats into the freezing metal walls of the walk-in cooler, surrounded by frozen goods and her own racing pulse. She dials the syndicate leader, abandoning all polite protocol. "Did you leave this note?" she asks, her voice sharp. A heavy, hollow silence follows. "No," Vincent replies. The bottom falls out of her world. It delivers a brutal lesson. When you gather the courage to ask the darkest questions, you must be entirely prepared for the answers to shatter your illusions. Through the static of the line, she hears the patriarch murmuring to someone in the shadows before returning his focus to her. "Emma," he says, his tone completely stripped of its usual armor. The undisputed king of the underworld, dropping her title, strikes her harder than a physical blow. He instructs her to lock the diner doors the second her shift ends. He promises an escort, but warns her to trust absolutely no one unless they speak the password, November. She echoes the month aloud, anchoring her spiraling mind. When he tells her to stay calm, she admits she is terrified, but promises to keep moving. The mobster exhales a soft human sigh. True courage is never the absence of terror. It is the quiet choice to take one more step forward anyway. Following his exact orders, she remains firmly planted in the diner. She scrubs the coffee machines until her knuckles ache, stacking inventory that requires no attention just to keep her hands from trembling. Her manager questions her frantic energy, and she brushes it off as simple exhaustion. Just after 3, the brass bell above the door chimes sharply. She braces herself for an intimidating enforcer, But the universe delivers a profound twist. Ethan pushes through the glass, wearing a rumpled jacket and a look of absolute exhaustion. He is running entirely on fumes and reckless loyalty. Life rarely sends the polished rescue we think we deserve. Instead, it offers the exact fractured soul we need to help us find our way through the dark. November, Ethan breathes out the word rum, desperate in his throat before she can even speak. Emma nods, the crushing weight in her chest lifting for just a fraction of a second. She confirms the code, and he immediately explains the narrowing window of time. The patriarch did not order him to come here. This broken heir chose to step directly into the line of fire for her. Tearing off her apron, she ignores her manager's confusion and sprints into the afternoon sun. A nondescript sedan idles at the curb, an anonymous ghost car built for survival. Ethan slams the accelerator before her door clicks shut. When you finally place your trust in someone, the map, and brace yourself for the violent turbulence ahead. "We have no idea who slipped you that warning," Ethan murmurs, his dark eyes obsessively sweeping the rearview mirrors. Emma is quickly learning that hypervigilance is the baseline emotion in his world. He dismantles her false hopes piece by piece. That massive tip was not a generous fluke. It was a calculated psychological strike from someone who tracked her to the compound. "They just want me frightened," she suggests quietly. Ethan immediately shatters that illusion. "No, they want you buried." He explains that fearful people make mistakes, but corpses cannot testify. Someone is frantically erasing their tracks before the boss uncovers the betrayal. Innocence is an invisible shield. It provides absolutely zero protection when the wolves start hunting. He had outlined this exact nightmare the day before, yet feeling the cold steel of reality is entirely different. Ethan jerks the steering wheel, slipping the vehicle through a tight gap in the traffic. He drops a crucial piece of the puzzle. His father has been conducting brutal interrogations since midnight, desperately searching for the traitor inside his own walls. The mole is backed into a corner, and cornered animals make desperate, sloppy mistakes. Leaving a physical note in a public space was a massive tactical error. Emma stares blankly at the passing streets, suddenly longing for her cramped apartment. "Stick with me, because you and I never truly comprehend the quiet majesty of a mundane existence until chaos violently strips our unappreciated peace away from us." Emma sits in the passenger seat, mourning the ghost of her normal life. The last 36 hours of violence have shattered her reality. When she asks where they are heading, Ethan promises a safe harbor, noting his father needs 12 hours to clean up the mess. Then this hardened Mafia enforcer lets out a heavy breath and attempts another apology. Emma instantly turns to steel. She tells him to stop, making it clear she owns her choices, refusing to play the helpless victim in his tragic hero narrative. Ethan watches her a moment too long, gazing at her like a beautiful flame he knows will burn him. The lesson here is profound. Unbreakable bonds of respect between two people are not formed in comfort, but in the absolute terror of surviving the dark together. They drive in silence for 20 minutes, leaving the glittering skyline for a quiet, forgotten neighborhood. Ethan kills the engine in front of an ordinary brownstone, unlocks the heavy door, and waves her inside. When Emma asks whose place this is, Ethan simply answers that it belongs to him. He does not mean the syndicate, but himself. The shift in atmosphere is startling. His father's estate was a freezing museum designed to project power and intimidate rivals. This place is beautifully ordinary. It is the hidden bunker where a lethal soldier finally removes his heavy armor. You and I can understand the absolute truth of a person simply by observing the quiet, messy sanctuary they build for themselves when the rest of the world finally stops watching. Looking around, Emma spots worn paperbacks, an unwashed mug, and again, all logic, standing in the center of a hitman's private refuge. Her muscles finally uncoils. All. Ethan heads toward the kitchen, telling her to sit anywhere and warning that his cooking is tragic. Emma tries to maintain her tough exterior, but her exhausted body loudly betrays her. Surviving pure terror takes a toll. She completely surrenders, collapsing into the couch cushions and finally letting her brave facade slip away. The truth of human nature is clear here. We all forge incredibly heavy emotional armor to survive a brutal reality. But eventually, we just need a quiet, untidy room where we can lay our heavy shields down and simply breathe. You know that specific late-night atmosphere, when shadows stretch and the desire to vanish takes over. Emma leans back, taking 3 desperate breaths to fight off rising panic. Ethan calls out from the kitchen to check on her. She lies effortlessly, asking him to distract her with something normal. A spoon clinks, and Ethan drops a quiet revelation. He confesses that he wanted to be an architect. Up until he was 19, he dreamed of building things. But then illness struck his grandfather. The crime syndicate demanded an heir, and his bright future was buried. It is a crushing reality, yet it holds a vital meaning. Sometimes the beautiful futures we carefully construct must fall to pieces, just so the people we love have a chance to survive the storm. When Emma asks if he resents his path, the question hangs in the air like a heavy blade. Ethan stops. With devastating honesty, he admits that some days, merely looking at a beautiful building physically aches, forcing him to kill that part of his mind. Leaning against the doorframe like a figure cast in shadow, he turns the spotlight on her, asking what she wanted to be. Emma freezes. No one has asked her that since she was a teenager. A teacher, she whispers, remembering the imaginary classrooms of her youth. This brings us to a heartbreaking truth. It is a quiet, devastating tragedy how easily we abandon our inner child. The brightest parts of who we are often end up buried beneath the exhausting, brutal grind of simply trying to survive another day. Emma remembers how her mother used to watch her play teacher, smiling at her dedication. Hearing this, Ethan's hot mask dissolves into something tragically gentle. When he asks why she never pursued it, Emma delivers a crushing reality check. It was the exact same reason he gave up his own dream. Life simply got in the way. He stares at her, and for the first time, the enforcer's gaze holds zero icy calculation. It is replaced by deep understanding, exposing a massive fracture in the emotional armor they both carry. Soon after, he hands her a bowl of pasta that tastes like pure salvation. We spend our lives constructing walls to project strength, but the moments that truly save us happen when we drop the fierce act and allow another person to nourish our tired souls. The quiet sanctuary cannot last forever because the surrounding tension is thick enough to choke on. Emma pushes her empty bowl away and demands the full truth about the rival boss, Caruso. Ethan leans forward, and in that brief motion, the gentle host vanishes, replaced by the terrifying shadow of his Mafia father. He explains that Caruso has controlled the Eastern Territory for 8 years under a fragile truce, but the moment his father loosened his grip to let Ethan take the wheel, Caruso smelled blood in the water and immediately struck. It is a dark reflection of how the world operates. The absolute second you decide to step back, lower your guard, and enjoy a fleeting moment of peace, someone will inevitably cross the line just to see if your teeth are still sharp. Ethan stares at his hands, visibly consumed by guilt. He explains how the violence began with minor accidents. In response, he embraced his dark inheritance and severed one of Caruso's primary supply lines, intending to project dominance. His fatal error was keeping his father in the dark, believing he was acting as the sole savior of the family. Emma pierces right through his tough exterior. She tells him he simply wanted to prove he could command the empire without his father holding his hand. The resulting silence is incredibly heavy. We so often inflict the deepest wounds on those who love us just to prove our fierce independence. Seeking guidance from the people who raised us is never a sign of weakness, but a vital strategy for surviving an unforgiving world. Exhausted, Ethan rubs his eyes and admits her analysis is flawless. Then he drops a sickening revelation. Someone embedded within their own crime family sold him out. Emma leans in, captivated by the deadly politics, asking who had access to the secrets. Ethan confesses only 2 men knew the plan, his father's most loyal soldiers, Luca and Dom. When Emma challenges his trust, he attempts to deflect, but she pushes forward. He admits he believes Luca is clean, but his instincts scream that Dom is the traitor. The trap is that his father demands absolute proof, which is impossible to gather against a ghost. Trust is exactly like a sheet of pure glass. The instant you detect the smallest fracture, you spend the rest of your days terrified the entire window is about to shatter. Stick with me here because the psychological warfare is about to escalate. Emma sits rigid, her survival instincts dialed so high, she flinches at passing tires. Her mind starts connecting the terrifying dots. She realizes the threatening message she received was from the rival syndicate. The traitor inside the family fed Caruso her identity. The enemy knows she was inside the Kingpin's private office, and they are losing their minds calculating what she might have witnessed. Ethan is paralyzed by her brilliant deduction, demanding she explain her logic. Fear is an incredibly accurate compass in life. If you ever need to uncover someone's darkest secrets, simply sit back and study exactly what causes them to panic and scramble in the dark. Emma maps out the reality, explaining that the traitor is suffocating as the walls close in. The mole watched an ordinary waitress get dragged into the Don's inner sanctum, followed by urgent phone calls. Looking Ethan dead in the eye, she reveals the enemy is targeting her, simply because they have absolutely no idea what intelligence she possesses. The unknown always generates far more terror than the actual truth. Ethan stares in disbelief, stunned that she unraveled a massive underworld conspiracy in under a minute. She offers a tight smile, noting she had plenty of time to think while pouring coffee. Your mind remains your most lethal weapon. Even when you are stripped of all physical power, your ability to connect the hidden dots is the one defense no enemy can ever steal from you. Ethan stares at her with awe and realization. He confirms that her terrifying theory is a source of pure leverage. The only thread keeping her alive right now is the enemy's blinding fear of the secrets she might be concealing. As that chilling reality sinks in, Ethan decides his father needs to hear this directly. He dials the number, and when Vincent answers, Ethan places the phone onto the coffee table. The device sits there like a dangerous bridge suspended between her civilian existence and their dark empire. Ethan tells the Kingpin she has something critical to share. Listen to this final truth. Sometimes the exact vulnerability that marks you as a target can be weaponized into a shield. Allowing your enemies to fear the quiet secrets you hold is often the smartest way to survive a war you never asked to join. Emma leans into the phone, stripping away every illusion. She explains flawlessly to the boss that the warning note was not a standard threat, but a glaring beacon of panic. The simple fact that she is still breathing is pushing the traitor into deep paranoia. The silence from the speaker is incredibly heavy. Vincent exhales, realizing she intends to use herself as bait. She is unflinching, reminding him the bait is already in the water. Ethan jumps in, whispering his suspicion that the traitor is Dom, but Vincent snaps, shutting his son down entirely. It is a stunning shift in power, and it reveals a harsh truth about survival. When you finally stop running and start turning the traps of your enemy against them, you shed the skin of the victim and become the hunter. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? The worst betrayals never come from the shadows, they come from the dinner table. Ethan B.H.S. begs his father to see the truth. The rat knew Emma was at their estate, sending a hitman to her diner by 1 in the afternoon. Only someone managing the daily schedule could do that, and Luca lacks that clearance. The pause that follows feels like dirt hitting a coffin. Ethan confirms Dom is the only man with that access. The atmosphere on the phone shifts into pure tragedy, sounding like a man bleeding from a blade to the spine. Vincent chokes up, whispering that Dom stood by him for 22 years. You can give someone blind trust, only to realize they spent every single second forging a weapon to finally use against you. Vincent sounds like a man holding back a hurricane. He masks the absolute devastation in his voice, repeating that Dom was family for 2 decades. Emma looks away, feeling like she just crashed a private funeral. Ethan keeps his composure, promising to secure the hard proof. He begs his father to let him handle the traitor cleanly, avoiding reckless drama in the streets. Vincent sighs a ragged breath. He wants to finish it himself, but after an agonizing pause, the old man yields. He quietly tells his son to explain the plan. This is the exact moment the legendary boss passes the heavy crown to his heir. There comes a day when you must stop asking for permission and simply step up to carry the burdens your parents can no longer hold. Ethan sheds his old self, transforming into the ruthless leader he was born to become. He stares at the phone and flatly states that Emma is the plan. Our girl absolutely freezes. Ethan explains that since she is the loose thread the syndicate is sweating over, they will fake her skipping town. In reality, she will be their hidden weapon, moving like a ghost. Nobody in the underworld will suspect a simple waitress of playing high-level chess, especially an arrogant man like Dom. Vincent barks a harsh warning, terrified of using a civilian in a war. But arrogance is always a fatal blind spot. The very second you assume someone is weak because of where they come from, you hand them the exact invisible weapon they need to completely destroy your world. Vincent demands to know what wild scheme his son is plotting. Ethan plays it ice cold, explaining they will orchestrate a fake run in between Dom and Emma. She will drop vague hints and let his paranoid conscience do all the heavy lifting. His reaction will be the final proof the family needs. Ethan praises her to his father, declaring she is a natural at mental warfare. Stick with me, because we are going to watch this play out together. The silence on the phone stretches for an eternity. 15 seconds. 20. Emma counts the ticks just to keep from losing her mind. You rarely have to extract a confession from a guilty person. Give them a quiet space and enough rope, and they will almost always hang themselves. Emma realizes she is being dragged straight into the eye of a Mafia hurricane she never asked to join. Vincent cuts through the thick tension, his voice stern but fair, telling her straight up that no one will force her into this deadly game. He makes absolutely sure Ethan hears it, so there is zero confusion, then asks what she wants to do. Emma closes her eyes, flashing back to that creepy warning note, the dark car idling in the night, and the rat who sold Ethan out to die in a freezing alleyway. She knows she cannot let a 2-decade betrayal walk away. The absolute hardest choices you will ever make are the ones where doing nothing actually hurts far more than walking straight into the roaring fire. Emma is absolutely done playing the victim. She thinks about her mother. A woman who spent her life suffocating beneath quiet regrets. Emma refuses to inherit that tragic silence. She demands every piece of intel they have on Dom. Vincent lets out a heavy sigh, relieved she is stepping up. He spills the secrets. Dom is 61, incredibly vain, and believes he is the finest judge of character in the entire mob. Ethan scoffs in the background, proving Dom is blind to his own reality. Vincent reveals Dom holds court at Carmine's every Thursday. 2 days away, Ethan panics, begging her to back out, but Emma just stares into the dark, completely fearless. The most dangerous people are not those forced into a corner, but those who voluntarily walk straight into the flames. Emma shuts their hesitation down, telling them to stop treating her like glass. She hits these men with a massive reality check. She spent 12 years handling the most unpredictable people in cramped spaces. Sitting across from an arrogant boss and exposing his secrets will be a walk in the park. She lets the silence hang, ensuring they feel her absolute gravity. Real power never needs to shout to make the room shake. She demands every single detail about Dom, asking what feeds his ego and what gives him cold sweats. The tension is incredibly thick. Finally, Ethan caves with a quiet agreement. Vincent echoes him, his voice dropping into a dark resolve. The most devastating power moves are often made by the exact people society trains us to ignore. Those 2 days feel like an absolute eternity, but also like 2 frantic minutes. Time is cruel when you are bracing for a massive collision. Thursday is sprinting right at her. She has 48 hours to morph into the helpless shadow, a predator, like Dom expects to see. Emma spent 12 years being underestimated by society, and now she is weaponizing that invisibility. Wednesday is a total drag. She works her usual diner shift, flying entirely under the radar. She pumps out bitter coffee, wipes down sticky tables, and flashes a perfect fake smile. She wishes a good day to strangers who will forget her face instantly. Never confuse a quiet routine with weakness. The person pouring your morning coffee might just be plotting the downfall of a massive empire. Emma plays her daylight role absolutely flawlessly. To Dom and his crew, she is just some terrified civilian who ran away in a panic. But late at night, the mask drops entirely. She sits at her kitchen table, listening to Ethan outline every detail about the enemy. She studies Domenico Ferraro like she is prepping for the final exam of her life. She memorizes his rhythm, his desires, and his massive ego. Dom is an old-school player. He has been with the family for decades, blending in like expensive furniture. He is so embedded that everyone simply stopped watching him. He is cautious, but only out of rusted habit. When a person gets too comfortable in their power, they stop looking for the hidden traps. That arrogant comfort is what will destroy them in the end. Let us dig deeper into this mindset together. Dom has spent decades standing inches from the fire without ever getting burned. He is fiercely proud of how well he reads a room, believing he is the top judge of character in the syndicate. Ethan destroys this delusion entirely. Dom is incredibly vain, living for that quiet respect at expensive restaurants. He craves the attention of women who know the dark side of the world. But Emma is 32, and she has been underestimated since she was a teenager. She knows exactly how to play this psychological game. She transforms into the exact woman a boss will label and dismiss in 30 seconds flat. Being underestimated is the absolute greatest superpower you can possess. They never see the blade coming until it is far too late. Ethan gives her the final rundown, his voice dropping into a serious whisper. He tells her not to force anything. Just be the mirror this arrogant boss wants to look at. Let him fill the dead air. We know the deal with guys like this. Arrogant men will suffocate if they are not talking. They desperately need to hear their own voice to feel in control. Emma knows Dom will eventually bring up the family. When he does, Ethan tells her to look shattered. She needs to play the traumatized victim perfectly. Emma replies coldly that faking the pain will not be hard at all. The phone goes dead silent. Ethan drops his tough guy armor, hitting a raw tone that proves he genuinely cares. Sometimes, the heaviest emotional scars you carry end up being the exact weapons you need to win the war. Ethan spirals into pure panic, begging her to abort the mission if anything feels wrong. He reminds her that Luca is waiting in the restaurant. The line grows heavy with a suffocating silence as Emma simply sighs. She is completely over his frantic warnings. She breathes a quiet goodnight and hangs up, managing 4 hours of restless sleep before the city wakes. Instead of running, she does something extraordinary. She fights the terror until the sunroom, sitting with the creeping dread until the sun rises. We have all been there, backed into a corner by our own minds. But the truth is, you can never outrun your anxiety. The only way to survive the nightmare is to sit in the dark, stare the monster right in the eyes, and claim your own space. Emma maps out the board with total clarity. What is the worst thing that could happen? Dom senses the trap, and she simply walks away, while her Mafia shadows clean up the mess. But the best outcome? Dom opens his mouth. Driven by a fragile ego, this man will hand over the rope for his own execution. Emma is not just a frightened girl playing detective. She has survived violent men since she was 12 years old. She knows the rhythm of their arrogance. She can survive one more dinner. Listen, you and I both know this fundamental truth. Survival rarely belongs to the loudest person in the room. Often, it just requires you to stand your ground, refuse to blink, and let an arrogant fool destroy his own kingdom. Thursday finally breaks. Emma dresses in a flawless disguise and pushes through the doors of Carmine's. The restaurant is suffocating with old money and casual arrogance, but she moves through it like a ghost. Sitting alone by the window with perfect posture, she orders a sparkling water. She completely refuses to scan the room for her hidden backup. A predator would instantly spot a nervous victim searching for an exit. At 5 minutes past 1, the devil arrives. Dom steps into the light, his tailored suit oozing with the confidence of dirty money. There is a deeply practical lesson hiding in this moment. If you ever need to trap a monster, you have to act like you own the hunting ground. Unwavering confidence is the best armor you can wear in a dangerous room. Dom works the dining room like a king holding court. He shakes hands, projecting the aura of an untouchable god, but Emma a mask of confidence. He is wearing a mask of confidence, just like she is, except his routine is polished by decades of violence. He notices her instantly. She can feel the heavy weight of his gaze dragging across her profile, the cold calculation of a shark circling its next meal. Emma times her reaction perfectly, staring out the glass until the exact right second. She turns, catches his stare, and widens her eyes to play the frightened deer. The psychology here is fascinating. Dangerous predators always believe they control the board, making them totally blind to the fact that they are walking straight into a carefully laid trap. Emma offers him a frail smile, painting the picture of a woman whose heart is miles away. Dom settles nearby, flanked by 2 massive enforcers. She clocks the guards in her peripheral vision, but acts as if they do not exist. She forces down a bite of food, letting the tension simmer. Right on schedule, his heavy shadow blocks her light. His voice drops into a smooth, practiced rhythm, noting that she looks like someone who got stood up. He flashes a warm, rehearsed smile and introduces himself. Emma plays her part beautifully. She exhales her first name, offering 0 details, absolute innocence. This brings up a crucial rule of survival. The smoothest talkers often hide the sharpest teeth. Never trust a warm, easy smile from a man who circles his fellow humans like prey. Emma softly tells him she is not waiting for anyone, just lost in thought. Dom gestures to the empty chair. Emma pulls off an acting masterclass, pausing for a vulnerable second before nodding. Dom takes the seat and orders a drink without looking at the menu, flexing his unspoken authority. He starts probing into her life, deploying the fake empathy of a man who knows people only confess secrets when they feel safe. But Emma is 10 steps ahead. She feeds him a stripped-down version of her actual life, claiming she is just a struggling waitress. Let us look at this tactic together. The most unbreakable lies are always woven with strands of truth. When you need to deceive an arrogant expert, just hand them a boring reality they will happily ignore. We all know that feeling when someone listens to you just a little too intensely. Emma sits across from Dom, letting the heavy silence do the psychological lifting. She casually mentions having a difficult week, playing the tired civilian perfectly. Dom stares at her with manufactured warmth, but behind his eyes, the gears are grinding. He is quietly stockpiling ammunition. Emma executes her next move flawlessly. She drops her gaze to her glass, adding an anxious jaw clench she practiced in the mirror. Then, she casually mentions running into some incredibly powerful people. It is a brilliant play, revealing a very simple life lesson. Sometimes, playing the complete fool is the absolute sharpest weapon you can ever draw against a deeply manipulative mind. Dom stares at her, and his mask briefly slips. Emma catches a wild micro-expression. It is a razor-sharp interest, like a guard dog catching a scent in the dark. He tries to smooth it over, murmuring that her situation sounds uncomfortable. But Emma presses the blade deeper. She claims she now knows far more than she ever wanted to. She wants him sweating. What follows is 3 agonizing seconds of dead silence. In that tiny window, Dom makes the fatal error she was hunting for. He completely fails to ask what she knows. An innocent person would instantly demand details. The psychological lesson here is impossible to ignore. The questions people actively choose to avoid will always expose exactly what they are trying to hide. Instead of acting like a normal person, Dom flashes a hollow smile and changes the subject. He rambles about how powerful men are usually only good at one thing. He steps completely around the massive red flag Emma just planted. He never asks who she met. He never asks what secrets she uncovered. He dodges the threat with the ease of a crime boss who has evaded prison for 22 years. Sitting there, Emma feels a chilling wave of clarity wash over her. Ethan was right about this man. She maintains her innocent act for 20 more minutes, feeding him fake panic. It forces us to confront a harsh reality about human nature. Once you finally see the monster behind the mask, you can never go back to believing the illusion, no matter how flawless it looks. She leaves pockets of dead air in the conversation, letting Dom fill them up so he feels completely in control. By the time she escapes the restaurant, the adrenaline crash hits hard, making her legs tremble. She walks down the sidewalk before Luca steps out of the shadows like a ghost. He motions to a waiting car and drops a terrifying detail. He heard every single word. Emma freezes, realizing the syndicate literally wired the dining room. The boss wanted undeniable proof. She swallows her anger, knowing better than to fight a mob enforcer on the street. It is a bitter, cynical truth about the world. Trust is an incredibly expensive currency, and powerful men will always demand to verify it. Luca tells her both bosses are waiting. Stick with me here, because we are stepping into a room thick with absolute dread. Vincent is pacing the floor when Emma arrives, while Ethan stands perfectly still, looking like a grim shadow. The air is practically vibrating with tension. They heard the recording. Emma takes a seat and confirms the cold reality. Dom did not ask a single question. Vincent looks completely shattered as he slowly nods. His oldest friends sidestep the bait. Emma looks the grieving boss dead in the eye and delivers the psychological final blow. Innocent people demand answers, but guilty people deflect. Vincent looks as though his very soul has been ripped out. The lesson here is profound. Complete silence and rapid deflection are often the loudest confessions a guilty conscience can make. Emma holds her ground, reminding the room that this trap was exactly what Ethan designed. It was a calculated test to prove his innocence, and Dom failed spectacularly. The silence that follows is suffocating, heavier than concrete. Emma sighs quietly, watching Vincent endure the agony of 22 years of blind loyalty dissolving over an audio tape. She does not push the old man, understanding that painful truths must be fully felt before they can be handled. Across the dim room, Ethan meets her gaze, and a profound understanding passes between them. It leaves us with a beautiful, tragic life lesson. Sometimes, two broken people can start from opposite ends of the world, only to find themselves standing in the exact same fire, finally feeling completely understood. The heavy silence breaks when Vincent steps into the dim hallway. Through the cracked door, Emma catches the frigid, calculated cadence of his voice, delivering a dark command. Inside, Ethan sinks into the leather chair, his posture crumbling under the weight of 4 agonizing days of pure survival. Emma leans in, her voice a murmur, confessing that Ethan was right about Dom failing to see her true nature. She admits the bitter anger that sparked, even though weaponizing her perceived weakness was the very strategy that kept her breathing. This scene reveals a quiet, enduring truth about the human condition. Remaining unseen offers a powerful layer of armor against a hostile world, yet it still leaves a profound ache when people look right past you, as if you simply do not exist. Let us unpack this scene together. Emma feels the sting of erasure, explaining how Dom stared at her for 20 seconds and entirely dismissed her humanity. Ethan responds with surprising gentleness, asking if she turned that blind spot into a weapon. She nods, confessing the heavy psychological toll it demanded. After 12 exhausting years of blending into the background, she had just begun hoping to shed her ghostly existence. Ethan offers a look of raw vulnerability, softly assuring her that her invisible days are numbered. When Vincent returns, the fearsome crime lord vanishes for a fleeting second, leaving only a tired, broken father. It leaves us with a deeply comforting reality. The painful scars that once forced us into the shadows never have to dictate the permanent shape of who we are. Vincent drops heavily into his chair and firmly declares that the situation with Dom is being handled. He offers no details, leaving zero room for debate. Emma instinctively knows better than to probe. She understands the dark criminal ecosystem she has entered, but desires no part in whatever brutal consequence awaits the traitor. Yet Ethan pushes the line, demanding answers about Caruso. Vincent strikes back with a terrifying glare, instantly silencing his son, expressly forbidding any more rogue operations. You can practically observe decades of generational trauma hanging heavily in the quiet room before Ethan finally submits. This standoff reveals a stark truth about family dynamics. Establishing rigid, unshakable boundaries is often the only way we can protect our sanity from the very people who claim to love us the most. Consider how a profound crisis can completely overwrite our history. In that tense room, the dynamic between a hardened father and his estranged son undergoes a seismic shift. Their relationship was fractured for decades, yet the terror of the past 4 days has forged a sudden, undeniable bond. Vincent then turns his piercing gaze toward Emma. He opens his mouth, But the formidable patriarch falters. This is an underworld kingpin who has spent his existence bending others to his will, yet now he is rendered entirely speechless. He whispers that he simply lacks the vocabulary to honor her actions since that violent night in the alleyway. The takeaway here is deeply moving. Genuine, life-altering gratitude rarely requires the perfect sentence. It almost always speaks the loudest in the vulnerable spaces where words fail us completely. Emma instinctively attempts to brush off the praise, but Vincent raises a heavy hand to halt her. With a rare softness, he asks that she simply allow him to speak. He details exactly what she accomplished, walking blindly into a labyrinth of organized crime where she did not belong, yet flawlessly executing every decision under suffocating pressure. She rescued his heir, confronted his inner circle with sharp truths, and engaged in psychological warfare against a seasoned predator. She managed all of this through the elegant camouflage of a woman whom the world has always ignored. It is a masterful display of hidden resilience. This narrative imparts an essential piece of wisdom. We must never mistake a person's silence for fragility. The most overlooked individual almost always harbor the most formidable strength when the moment demands it. Vincent drops his impenetrable Mafia facade, his voice turning profoundly quiet. Stripped of his dark authority, he looks into her eyes and declares that he is eternally in her debt. Emma sits perfectly still. In her mind, she is suddenly that desperate teenager in a stained apron, reflecting on a lifetime spent sprinting from danger to avoid the bleak limitations of her reality. Squaring her shoulders, she meets the gaze of the city's most lethal architect and states she desires only one thing. When the smoke of this underworld war finally clears, she wants absolute confirmation that the violence is permanently finished. This exchange illuminates a harsh but necessary reality. Existing in a perpetual state of hypervigilance is merely surviving, not living. True freedom only ever begins the very moment you finally decide to stop running. Pay close attention to the gravity of this scene. Emma holds the unwavering stare of a syndicate boss, demanding he personally deliver the news when the retaliation is complete. She firmly rejects a future haunted by paranoia, endlessly scanning the shadows for phantom assassins. In response, Vincent offers his solemn vow without a trace of manipulation, understanding that authentic trust holds far more currency than violence. Gathering her belongings, Emma locks eyes with Ethan. He watches her with a radically tender expression. His defensive walls completely collapsed. He murmurs that he will see her next Thursday, his tone heavy with the profound emotions he cannot articulate. This illustrates a deeply resonant truth about human connection. Real safety is never found behind iron gates or loaded firearms. It is built entirely upon the promises we choose to honor. You and I know how rare it is to find stillness after a catastrophic storm. Ethan offers a gentle smile through his battered features, mentioning his plan to visit her diner for coffee. Emma studies the man before her, a stark contrast to the bleeding figure she rescued from an alleyway just days prior. His dark universe of crime feels light years away from her mundane routine. She contemplates the unpredictable gravity that pulls two vastly different orbits together before softly agreeing to save him a booth. Stepping out into the crisp evening air, she slides into the back of a waiting town car. The sprawling metropolis hums around her, entirely indifferent to the psychological earthquake that just took place. This leaves us with a deeply comforting philosophy. No matter how violently your personal world fractures, tomorrow will inevitably offer a quiet place to sit and heal. Consider the profound disorientation of returning to a normal routine. Emma rests against the seats of the vehicle, watching the architecture of her old life slide past the tinted glass. She sees her quiet street and the weathered brick of her apartment. The physical geography of her neighborhood remains entirely a bar, the underworld chaos she just survived. However, the woman staring back in the reflection is now an utter stranger. The intense trauma has completely rewritten her psychological baseline, leaving her unsure of who she is supposed to be moving forward. Yet in that quiet observation, a vital realization takes hold. Enduring profound uncertainty is vastly different from being truly lost. Sometimes, finding yourself entirely surrounded by the thickest fog simply means you have finally reached the genuine starting line of your life. The fascinating reality of feeling directionless is often just the soul evolving faster than the mind can articulate. Emma steps onto the pavement and ascends the staircase, turning the deadbolt to secure herself against a fractured reality. Her apartment is wrapped in an overwhelming silence. She hangs her coat and methodically prepares her coffee machine. Collapsing into a kitchen chair, her gaze locks intensely onto her empty palms. These are the exact instruments that were coated in arterial blood merely days ago. These same fingers pressed desperately against a wound to anchor a dying man to the earth, defying the chilling commands of a syndicate boss. This striking imagery serves as a crucial reminder for our own journeys. Our bare hands often possess a profound, dormant capability for resilience that we entirely fail to recognize until the darkest hour demands it. What is remarkable is the psychological fortitude she displayed by refusing to flee. She anchored herself to the concrete of that alleyway, placed the impossible call, and held her ground. She locked eyes with a notorious criminal architect and refused to submit, walking willingly into the labyrinth of Mafia warfare. She emerged uncompromised. As the coffee maker sputters to a halt, Emma absorbs the reality that she is built for a purpose far heavier than her previous life allowed. She pours the cup, letting the warmth ground her fingers. Her apartment will never feel like the same home again, but the paralyzing fear that once governed her is completely gone. The narrative concludes with a vital truth. By reaching into the dark to rescue a stranger, Emma inadvertently salvaged her own spirit. Often, pulling someone else back from the abyss is the only way we truly save ourselves.